This conference will now be recorded.
I think actually it's the mayor that opens the meeting, and then once it's opened up, then the council becomes.
So,
It's their forum to open
actually, I think we need one more to start. So the budget committee is comprised of a equal number of citizens as to the mayor and city council. So we have 6 council members and a mayor, that's 7. So the budget committee would be 14 members, and a typical quorum is a simple majority, meaning, so that would be 8 out of 14. And so we have 7 as I count, and I believe, tell me your name again?
Nancy Fraser.
Nancy Fraser, we would need to have her be appointed as a budget committee member. I think you are both current budget committee members. So I think the most appropriate thing to do, Mr. Mayor, would be call the meeting to order and take roll. Is there anyone with a phone who we could call an absent council member? Or I know Ann Velisis cannot make it. It would be nice if she could appear by phone, but I don't know if that's possible. Okay, got it. All right.
I'll make a call really quick too. Yeah.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah, but we'll have a forum.
Oh,
We don't
have equal number of community members.
Sure, but you would still have a quorum of the committee with the numbers.
Yes. We've had many years, I mean, at the forum, we try our best for budget buddies, but we do come up short. So it's the forum, I mean, it's the forum of the whole committee.
So we just need one more, and I think we're good.
And actually, I think the reason you need a quorum of counselors is because you're.
Oh, you gotta open the meeting in the first place.
As far as the.
no. He's not a voter. Yeah.
But on the budget committee, he is a vote. He is not a tiebreaker on the budget committee. It's a different animal. He has a different, he's just yes, of course, yeah, and he would be able to also vote on the budget because he's not the mayor in the budget. He's not serving that role.
But then we just warn them.
Well, okay, so, well, yeah,
Yeah, we've never had this many over there as we've been on this.
I understand. Okay, well, we'll carry on.
Yeah.
She'll sit in front of somebody up the street.
It's amazing.
How about the former, he's not an employee.
Put him on the street, I'll grab him. Go to Salty Dog and see if he would.
I think what we'll do is,
This place, I think you remember this work over here. Yeah, it's fun. So much fun though. I've changed a lot. I'm busy.
Yeah, mine is like that. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna have a forum here shorter. There's probably
Right,
11 minutes.
right. Sounds like my house.
and if they wanted, they could appear by phone. The budget's available online.
Right, and that's, we're gonna have Councilor West calling in right now, so at least get rolling. And he's padding, so I don't know how well he'll be able to hear.
Medication for you, right? Yeah.
You can pause and tell us what's wrong.
maybe if I left, we'd have an equal number of board members and.
Yeah,
We gotta have public, so you guys did that. So,
We're gonna have you open the meeting.
I know the council president.
Yeah. You don't stand up and call forward and.
Hi.
You can't switch to.
I don't know about you, but yeah.
Who else did we have on the public side?
Yeah, you see here.
You know, yeah.
And the year before. we were-
I think,
Yeah.
And even
Like even. Well, well, yeah, she worked. I used to live. And, Tree Boulevard.
Yeah, yeah.
Brooks Lane, that little. So I lived in. Tree.
I don't see it.
A number of years.
Yeah. Well, what I like about this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're,
So
you're,
that's it.
here's, here's, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, if you want to, I can read something for the assembly here. What it says is that if there are electors fewer than the number required, the governing body and the electors who are willing to serve shall be the budget committee. So the governing body and the electors willing to serve shall be the budget committee. What I recommend is that the city council, who is here, and we have a quorum of the city council with the mayor, have a quick emergency meeting and appoint Nancy as a budget committee member. So, Mr. Mayor, if you wanted to just quickly convene an emergency meeting to appoint Nancy as a, Nancy? Okay, and the last name?
Fraser.
Nancy Fraser on the budget committee, then we can proceed with the budget committee meeting.
Okay, so, but open up that meeting in itself and then
Sure,
close
quick.
it. Okay. This emergency meeting of the city of Fort Orford City Council on 5/31, May 31st, 2023 at 5:44. The purpose of this meeting is to appoint a new member to our budget committee as fast as possible. So I would entertain a motion to appoint Nancy Fraser to the budget committee for the city of Fort Orford 2023-24 budget cycle.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
Okay, call for the vote. Greg?
Yes.
Tim?
Tim, yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to close this meeting at. Oh, sorry.
Point of order?
So just maybe kind of move things along, that while you have it open,
Mhm.
go ahead, you're supposed to open up a public meeting for revenue sharing also.
Okay, when I open up the budget portion of it, or,
I'm gonna do it right now. Do you have the script for the revenue public hearing?
No. We can get one after a recess. I think we do a recess after and do the revenue
When we open up the budget meetings.
sharing. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, are you saying that the revenue sharing is a matter for the city council to do or for the budget committee?
The revenue sharing is to have a public hearing
Yes.
at the budget committee.
Yes, so we're not at the budget committee yet. We have just done a city council meeting to appoint Nancy Fraser, and now we're going to close the city council and go to the budget committee to do the revenue sharing. Okay, we are ready to proceed with closing the city council and opening the budget committee meeting.
Okay, so we will close this emergency meeting at 5:46. And now we'll go, it was just because we had to appoint Nancy. And now I'll open up the regular budget meeting of the city of Port Orford for the 2023-24 budget cycle at 5:46.
Thank you.
Open to close the meeting.
Very good. So this is the regularly scheduled duly noticed meeting of the City of Port Orford Budget Committee. I'm John Huddle, I'm the budget officer. I have presented you all with the budget message today, and it briefly talks about Oregon budget law. I think most of you have been through a budget process before, but the starting point under the budget law requires a balanced budget, and staff has presented the budget committee with a balanced budget. The first place you start on a budget is with resources. And resources are described as cash not expended from a prior year, taxes, fees, licenses, interest, rent, interfund revenue transfers. So we first start in the budget with an estimation of the city's resources. The budget law explains that grants are not included in budget resources except when the funds to be received in the ensuing year can be reasonably estimated with certainty. Because we don't really have any grants that we can reasonably estimate, we did not include grants as our budget resources. This is probably a change from last year. I think grants were included in resources. Then after we determine resources, then we allocate the resources to the different city programs, personnel. There's three types of expenses. There is capital, there is materials and services, which is purchasing items. Capital is usually a public improvement or building. And then there's personnel services, which is staff and typically a very large percentage of any budget. We have fund accounting at the city. This is in the fourth paragraph down, and this is how your budget binders are organized. The tabs are all organized with numbers to correspond to, to correspond to the city's funds. We start with the general fund, then we go into the parks and public safety and water enterprise fund. These are all numbered. It's almost like a table of contents here. The water capital, sewer enterprise, sewer capital, etc. And then, hello, do you have a question?
I was just saying, it's very nice to have it organized.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, I would say that Dina Lang deserves a lot of credit for that, as does David Johnson. As you can see, the budget law requires, so we will begin talking about the general fund, but we won't approve the general fund until the end because the general fund sometimes borrows and gets transfers to and from the other funds. You'll see that in the budget document itself. And so we wait until we've approved all the other funds and then come back and approve the general fund. The law requires that the city council appoint a budget officer. They did appoint me, and I was fortunate enough to have the services of David Johnson. So my job is to oversee the preparation of the budget. And I was fortunate enough to have David Johnson, who was the former city financial director, to basically do the real hard work. And as I said, budgeting. So then as you can see, the general fund, we receive revenue mainly from property taxes, and we have a maximum permanent tax rate of 2.2688 per 1,000 of assessed value. The budget document reflects this tax revenue as a resource, and therefore the budget committee should approve the maximum allowed permanent tax rate. The other revenue source we receive from tax is from a local option for public safety. The maximum rate for this tax is $1.80 per thousand, and the budget document reflects this revenue as a resource, and therefore the budget committee should approve the maximum rate allowed for public safety. We also use fees such as water fees and sewer fees, and these are what we call enterprise funds. They're like these mini businesses selling things for money, selling water for money, selling sewer services for money. And so the fees generally support those funds. In this case, I think the water fund was slightly underfunded. And so we, instead of borrowing so much from the general fund, we have proposed an interfund loan from, I think, the sewer capital to fund the water resource. Now, just while we're just on that slight topic, I wanted to show you this piece of paper, which should be at your places. If you didn't get it, I can give it to you. But what David Johnson has done is prepared a workup. And so we are going to recommend when it gets to the city council, that we do an increase in the water rates to help shore up the water enterprise fund, and also then to help pay back the loan to the sewer fund. So this is mainly informational because it would be a city council action, but it's showing the budget committee the financial policies of the city. Moving on, going to the budget overview again. So the budget document is, I call it an iterative process. Each budget kind of builds on budgets from the prior year's budget. And the budget law actually requires, and if you just open up to this first page in your budget book, this is the resources. So remember, we start with the resources. And so this is going to be the first page, the first tab, and it should say Fund 01 at the top, and then the column heading should say resources. You should see the word resources up in the left-hand corner at the top of all those columns. So when you see that, what you see is actually the state law requires that we give you the last 2 years of budgets for comparative purposes. And then the budget, the first line on the budget resource is cash forward usually, or unexpended cash from the last year. And so what we show here is for the 2023-24, we propose the prior year fund balance, the unspent money from the end of this year, beginning to be one of our first resources listed. So that's why I say the budget builds off the prior budget. And we have followed, for the most part, except for the grants. The last budget, I think, included grants as a resource, and we just don't have a reasonably anticipated grants to receive. So then you can also see the other revenues that are shown on this page. Property taxes, again, a very large source of our revenues, all of those things. And so we have here in the general fund, now this is a general fund, we have some other funds that have resources, like we talked about the water fees and the enterprise fund and the sewer fees, and also public safety has its own rate that we talked about. So the total resources proposed for the general fund is $877,000 total of sources of revenue to fund the general operations of the city. And then those are allocated throughout the budget towards the different departments. The budget hasn't changed a lot from department to department. I want to direct you, I think, to one other handout that I gave. Did everyone get a handout that looks like this? Okay, so the way the budget is prepared is we typically do what's called a status quo budget. You don't really change a lot from year to year, except for there are things that people meaning the departments of the city, want to do or need to do over the course of the upcoming year. It's like, what are we going to need all those resources for? And so in layman's terms, this would be called a wish list. So the prior interim city administrator, a guy named Gary Milliman, sent around to the departments, hey, what are you going to need for projects in this upcoming year? And we'll just go down at roof building. So general fund, a roof for the city hall for this building. You can see that's budgeted out of those resources. We need $85,000 this year for the roof. Then there's a community building. That's the building, some people call it the Legion Hall, but it's the one over south of the elementary school. The Battle Rock restroom and roof, that way center, the Wayside Visitor Center really needs a roof. the baseball concession roof. You can see that's not a big roof. There was a line item added because we watched when, for those of you in the budget committee, the Jubilee came to the city council and we made a funding request. And the Jubilee is typically funded out of, it says parks, and that is our transient lodging tax is a source of revenue for the parks, and it's restricted in what we can use it for. It's not really general fund, it's something else. But we're receiving more transient lodging tax than we thought. So what we're doing here is budgeting, and this is for next year's Jubilee. We're budgeting that for the Jubilee. Well, it's going to be in the next budget period. And then what we do then, budgeting is one part of it. We're putting the money there for them. And then if the city council, which we think they indicated to us that it's a possibility, we wanted, if that's what they wanted to do, to have the money available to them. So we've added a line item in the budget for Jubilee. And then the police department, you can see they wanted some of these items. So those funding items are listed there. And then there are funding items listed for the water work and whatnot. And so all of those items are included in the budget, except the very last item, not the sewer fund or the wastewater treatment plant roof, but if you go up right in front of where it says water fund total, there was a water project engineering for $645,000. And that is related to this grant that the city has applied for. It's called a BRIC grant, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. And it's a grant that we put a lot of work into. And we have done some engineering work on it. And it's to basically rebuild our water system. And the way I understand this grant, it's been told to me, I've been here a couple of weeks, I've made calls, I've talked to the people who've been working on this. But what it's told to me is that our engineering costs, when you get a grant, they want you to, or when you apply for a grant, you have to show that you have matching funds. And so these engineering costs are some of our matching funds is what I've heard. So we haven't included those, but it's possible so I did call the engineering company and I said, we don't have you in our budget. And he said, and I said, I don't think we can come up with this much money over the next year. And is it possible that you could give me perhaps some other choices and some priorities? And so between John Isidore and myself, and this fellow named Marlon at Civil West, he provided a list of prioritized items. And if the budget committee wants, everything else in the budget, in my opinion, is very straightforward and is covered by all of our usual practices. I don't want to go down fund by fund. I think in my budget document, I just pointed out about 3 issues, this one being one of them. The other one is the addition of the project. So we've added these projects. I don't know if we could, there's about 10 roofs in there. I don't know if we could get 10 roofs done in a year in this town, but so maybe if you wanted, you could say, well, take some of that roof money and put it to an engineering. But that's just, I know that's kind of budgeting on the fly, but it's what these public hearings are all about. So really, if there's any questions, or if you want to take a look at some of these priorities that the engineer has provided, I'm willing to do that. But staff is very satisfied with the budget that's been prepared. You could approve that and we could make budget adjustments if money came in. So it's really, if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
At this point, we should probably do the state revenue hearing portion.
Good.
Because we were supposed to
Absolutely.
right off the bat.
Sure.
And then we'll go from there.
Very good.
And the precedent of this is each year the state distributes excess revenues collected for special taxes such as liquor and gasoline. In order to be eligible to receive these funds, the city must hold 2 public hearings, one before the budget committee and one before the city council to discuss possible and proposed uses, respectively, of the funds. The use of state revenue sharing funds in the past includes police, fire, and park operations. The amount estimated and incorporated in the 2014-15 budget is $9,850.
12,770.
Thank you.
$12,170 of the 23-24. Okay, so now, public hearing is now open to receive testimony from the public regarding possible uses of the state revenue sharing funds. Has staff received any correspondence or contact from the public regarding the use of the state revenue sharing funds?
Staff has not, and there may be people listening on the internet. You might just make sure they know they could speak if they want to. We're the only one. Okay, very good. There's no one on our internet. We did advertise this meeting in the newspaper with the internet link, so then you would also then have a public hearing on the budget document itself. Good.
Yeah, right, but before the council itself. Okay, so hearing no requests to testify, I declare this public hearing closed. Now we can get back to it. We're gonna start with questions on resources, or I have a question right off the bat.
Very good.
First line. We approved, I know that this is prior fund balances, and so it just is what it is, but we approved 744,000. The projected ending is 347,000, but our new proposed balance is 134. So just looking at those numbers, I mean, if I'm looking at that correctly, from 21 to 21, 22 until now, we're down 60 grand, 80 grand. We're taking out last year's 744. Like, I don't know, but so I'm looking at that prior year fund balance, and I guess that's just a number that it is what it is, huh? That's just adding up the accounts and plugging it in.
Yeah, the 744,000. As near as I could tell, there was a prior year adjustment made with the gap entry that was made budgetarily. And that's why it would inflate this.
Yeah.
Seeing the same thing in water and sewer.
Gotcha.
It's interesting, and actually, it looked like it was for receiving of citation receivable.
Yeah. That's what that is.
It's not real money.
Right, but that explains, that answers this question right there, because that number jives with what, or that 1,000. Okay, thank you, that answers.
Kind of curious, because when I was here, the council voted 6-0 that there would be no citation receivable. When did you change that?
They might not have changed it. It may have been.
Well, they're kind of might want to sue the city for defamation.
I think that's tongue in cheek.
Definitely have a lot of videos where I was running through the mud for not receiving citation.
Oh, I see. All right.
But
Well,
yeah.
sure. This is a budget meeting. So I think, Mr. Mayor, that answered your question on that. And again, those are only general fund revenues. That's not all the revenues of the city.
I just, when I see that big of a change,
I agree. You got to ask a question.
Oh, and there, Councilor Velisis called earlier, and she wanted to, as far as the funding request, she had said that she talked to Mr. Milliman about putting 6,000 to the side for a grant opportunity or a grant planning. Yeah, planning. So I don't know if that is just going to be contingency or where. I'm just throwing that out there.
Very good. Well, let's take a look at the planning budget. That should be general fund, and it's 3 pages into tab number 1. We have a planning contract that went up from 22,000 to 25,000. And then legal services went from 0 to 1,000. So I think within the planning budget, we would have funds to do the grant that she was talking about. Now, that being said, it's not a particular line item. I believe,
I think we're okay. I think we're hitting those blocks of materials and services or where it comes from, like 6,000 isn't a drop in the bucket, but I think we have enough room. I just had to fight for it. But no, I just wanted to, Andy called me specifically about that.
She called me too, yeah. And then I was curious if we had any money in the emergency funds.
the emergency fund? Sure, well, let's take a look. Yep, that's the next page after planning. And we've got 3,000 for operating expenses. We got 17,000 in personnel. And then we have $10,000 in small tools and equipment and $1,000 in miscellaneous. So
Now, what personnel would that include?
so you can see the personnel, we divide the or the city administrator, myself, and the police chief in personnel, and that's a fraction. If you look, it's 8,000 of my salary and 4,000 of police chief salary. So this is one of those funds that pays for parts of our salary. And then at the bottom, you can see, there's 14,000 of other materials and services. And even though there may not be a particular line item you want, my understanding is once the money is into a fund, it can be spent as long as it stays in that fund. I'll defer to David if he has anything to add about if there are extreme restrictions on the spending of those funds on the line item versus being in the fund.
And then what about carryover from what didn't get spent this year?
I think because this is general fund, and I would just I think it would be included in the general fund carryover.
So the money would still be there in the emergency fund?
Well, it would, so it wouldn't, it would be in the general fund, and then the general fund would then fund the emergency fund, I believe, so that it would carry over into the general fund. So when you look at the very first page, and then it would be allocated out through the, so if I could, we go back to the first page, that's the resources on the general fund, and these next pages show the expenses of the general fund. And so these next pages, the administration, the court, the emergency management, the planning, and the non-departmental, those are where the resources of the general fund are allocated to. And so it wouldn't be, the carryover wouldn't go designated to emergency management, it would go to general fund, and we would just do reallocation again next year. And it would, as I said, the budget is iterative. It would probably be very similar to this, unless there was something that was going on that they came to the budget department ahead of the budget being prepared and said, we want to include this, and then we look and see if we could fund it. Does that
But
make
there's
sense?
not, like, if you're thinking of carryover as far as emergency management has this money, like this 30,000, like, or this 15,000 is already a given that we're gonna get that is not the case. Like like all intents and purposes, yes, probably that's gonna happen, but at any time, any of these funds could get gutted if we have an emergency too. So yes, it is a carryover, or those funds are available from the general fund, but it's not a given that they're carried over. So
It's reasonably likely, but David Johnson has something to add.
I'd like to clarify that the emergency management, planning, admin, and court are not funds. They're
Thank you.
departments.
Thank you.
So being the department, they don't have resources because the general fund has resources. So if you don't spend it, it stays there in the general fund.
that really clicked it in. So all these, what was was trying to use, the-
Department.
all these departments are just an expenditure.
Yes,
That's the only way
correct.
to look.
correct.
And then I'll get, thank you, Dave, that's, thinking good.
Yep. But Councilman Burns, the Budget Committee Member Burns, again, the likelihood is that we would do a similar budget as you can see, the pattern is we fund these things unless there's a request that someone wants to actually be included. So it would be very similar, would be my.
So if we wanted to get a container, say each year, for cashews, would that be a request or would that just, we would make a proposal later? in the
Yeah,
year?
it's a, it would probably be, yeah, the committee would make a proposal. And let me interject real quick that, just to remind everybody that we have been under the gun to get this done. And I look at the departments and yeah, maybe we can move a little bit from office to this or that to make it more appropriately at this single line item. But from what I'm hearing, we're okay if we allocate this bottom line number and we can wiggle around through the year. If we have to, we can do a supplemental budget, which nobody wants to do, but if we have to do with money or something, we have to do it anyways. But let's try to be nice to Dave and John, on the fine print stuff, because I know personally we could sit here and be like, oh, well, we could move a couple thousand over here, but because of the nature of it, I think that we're doing it. I'll quit interrupting. Dave.
I have a question which may be inappropriate. So what happened in Curry County when the internet was hacked? It seems like that cost Curry County a lot of money. And we're so close to Curry County that it seems a little scary. I mean, we're in Curry County. What have we done, and is something in the budget? Because it seems like that was an emergency situation and we added extra to help.
The server, we just did that. We just got a server.
We got lucky with our timing and we're getting a new server right at the same time.
No, but I think you're talking about a criminal act, a hack, an outside
We had
agent.
a criminal hack and there was, it was, what's the word?
Ransom.
Ransom, and they had to get FEMA in, and they had to get everyone in. Councilman Alcorn was, on YouTube. I mean, that's serious. Are we allocating emergency funds for those things? I mean, I know that we have.
Yeah, I was, David Johnson may have something to say, but
It may not be relevant. 2 years ago, our insurance company provided the policy for cyber.
Perfect.
At the time, we were taking $1 million policy for cyber attack. And if we wanted more, we could request it. So I think if that, I'm pretty confident it's still happening, that we're probably covered.
Thank you, that reassures me.
I think also, that's where Mayor Pat was pointing out that, the money's not, it's allocated, but it could get robbed. And in an event like that, like Curry County, I'm sure, they've had tough times budgeting over the years and they might have had to rob funds to take care of this. So, that and hopefully the insurance policy would cover us. But I think in those kinds of attacks, there really are no guarantees. I mean, you're basically held hostage. You either pay or you suffer. And I think they suffered and paid.
so, let me see, we can go into, again, if you take a look at the Parks Fund, it's a very similar, this is the next page, Fund number 14. You can see we have a very similar estimation. Now, Parks gets resources because that's the transient lodging tax. And then that shows the resources on that page, and then the page after that is the expenses out of Parks. And we also propose unappropriated reserves of $87,000 for Parks and $80,000 in contingency. So the Parks budget is very healthy.
So is there a way that we could get, when we have our park meeting tomorrow, is there a way that we might be able to get some of that 80,000, 87 to put on our dream sheet?
I think that to be put on your dream sheet.
One, it's not, you know, to put for next year's.
Yes, I think this year, I think you're going to be doing what you're doing. And then if you want to talk about planning for next year, I think you could reasonably anticipate some carry forward for next year.
So that we could take care of the major project in the park with that money, with that contingency unappropriated money and plus the 25,000 for the playground. And something that I guarantee the Parks Department would ask to move forward with.
Okay.
That's something we've been drastic. We didn't know we had that amount of money,
Mhm.
you know, to get that accomplished. So it's something that
Well, for the, and
we
so-
really essentially at about 10 grand.
okay, well,
160.
I think the TLT has come in more than we thought, and I know there's restrictions on TLT, but I just want to say that I think what you should do is really figure out what you want to do with your budget over the course of the next year, and then present that in projects. And then,
I just know that Parks Department hadn't put any of this as their dream sheet.
okay,
You know what I mean? The 4 items. So I'm just saying, you know, it's fine. But
Oh, yeah.
it's just, you have a committee that will come to me and be like, well, we didn't even talk about any of that.
very good.
So
Well, I came in
are we still moving forward with the community building to try to get the grant
with the Rotary.
with the Rotary in them?
I think so, and if I'm,
Well, I'm just saying, so are we gonna spend, you know, $50,000 on a roof?
well, it's budgeted. So if, and it is budgeted in the project.
Well, it's budgeted because we put it there.
Correct, but it doesn't mean you have to spend it for the roof. But it could, but it's budgeted to be spent.
That's it.
And if it went to a different project, it could probably go to a different project.
That's fine.
But
Well, we have to have something on the budget with the project.
I'm not, again, I think as long as its spending stays within the fund, I think that's okay. I don't know that it gets down to line items like that. So then the next one is the public safety fund. As you can see, we talk about the resources and they get the tax that we were talking about. And then this is the one where they sometimes are also supplemented by the general fund. There's transfers to public safety. That transfer went down this year, which was good. And then they are, as we can see, we have funded the request for the tools and equipment, the uniforms, and the body cameras and the vests. And, David Johnson has something to say there.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
On public safety, would this maybe be the place where you suggest that the local option be increased?
Well, I thought we had a max rate on the local option. Are you saying for when they go out to the local option at the next election?
The current $1.80 a thousand is not funding public safety.
Sure, but I thought, I'm not familiar with exactly the mechanics of the local option. I thought that it was, when you,
We can adjust it.
oh, you can? Okay,
We actually lowered it several years ago from 190 to 180.
okay,
But as good as that felt, it probably wasn't the best thing to do. We've struggled over the years having to fund the police department with the general fund. I mean, David can explain that year
Sure.
after year. This wasn't the first year that this has happened by no means.
well, David Johnson, do you have a recommendation for the budget committee about the maximum rate? Because I had written in the budget statement that they approved the maximum rate of 180 or 188 per thousand. Do you think, is there another number they should be? Because at the end of this, by the way, at the end of the hearing, there will be 3 motions. 1 would be to approve the budget, 2 would be to approve the permanent tax rate, and 3 would be to approve the special levy public safety rate. And so, David, if you have any information for them that could help them on that 3rd motion, that'd be great.
Well, one thing you gotta remember, we reduced that $350,000 transfer to $180,000. First of all, you got to understand why the $350,000 transfer was necessary. And that was, if you would look in page, I guess it'd be 12.
Oh, David, I'm sorry, the pages aren't numbered, so the public safety should be tab number 3, and then it's the second page of tab number 3 on the
So looking at the resource,
oh, the resources is the first page, excuse me.
then you'll see under the 22-2023 council adopted budget, they have 114,000 negative.
Yeah.
Not good budgeting. In order to erase that negative, they had to transfer paper money. And that's basically what it is. If you were to break it down to what it should have been, the transfers would be 200,000 year after year after year. It's largely not writing citations. A traffic officer was hired with the understanding that that traffic officer would only write citations and expected that it would fund 1.5 positions. This year, they have only written $163,000 in citations. The real bad part about that is that when you start subtracting out the expenses that goes to the citations for 163,000, 27% is uncollectible, 44,000. I want to leave you 119,000 citations. Of that 119,000, 40% goes to assessment, state assessment, and county assessment. That comes to 47,000. That leaves you 71,000. The county requires that they pay 32,000 for dispatch. So you subtract that off. And now you're down to 38,000. It's required that the city transfer 10% of citations to the street capital reserve, which is a good program. That comes to 16,340. You subtract that from citations, they have $22,000 to transfer to fund police. In the past, they have been writing 270,000, 300,000. They've even written 410,000. But what we're not seeing is the citations being written. It's
I think part of that was the weather for the
This
winter.
year, they've written 420 citations to get the 163,000. One officer wrote 10, another officer wrote 1, another officer wrote 37, but the other officer wrote 346. That
was last year.
That's this
This
year.
year.
The year we're in right now, in June. So the council needs to start managing public safety. I'm sorry. That's bottom line. I've a broken record. You all can attest to it. Every year I'm saying the same thing. So in order for the city to fund public safety without citation, you would have to double the local option to $3.60 a thousand. So you have a choice. You can have a police department, you can fund it with taxes, or you can fund it with citations.
And I know you're using some shorthand there. The citations technically go to the general fund, I think, and then they get transferred to the police. Isn't that how it works?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, don't the citation revenues go to the general fund and then are transferred as a general fund transfer to police? Yeah.
violation of law with the general. $256,000 of the American Rescue Act Plan was put in the general fund. And the general fund was living off. We had to take that money, put it in water where it should be. That's $256,000 that's gone out of the general fund, and that left general fund with $80,000. That was that close to spending money we did not have. That's something that water has done. Water has spent $141,000 more money than they have, not appropriation. It's fine in appropriation. It does not have a cash. It's spent $141,000 more than it actually had. That's violation of law, and that's one thing that we've tried to fix with the transfer of the American Rescue
This year.
this year.
Yep, and that's why our general fund, our carry forward, I think, in the general fund is $28,000, which is, a very small amount. Yeah, very, very small amount of carry forward because we've gotten it down to, what should be there. So we're not carrying forward stuff we don't have. So, good. And then the water enterprise fund, that's on, I was going to move on to tab number 4 then.
So is there something we need to do with public safety? I mean, is that?
Oh, well, at the end of the hearing, before the budget committee adjourns, there's 3 motions. One motion is to approve the budget and a final number. And then the other one is to approve the permanent tax rate. And then the other one would be to approve the public safety levy. And again, I've been helped by the discussion today about that. I just don't have the history of that. But apparently, you have a lot of flexibility to increase that. And what our consultant, David Johnson, is telling us is that that would go a good long way to help fund the police as well as then therefore help the general fund.
We have to convince the voters to.
That's the big, that's the
Oh,
big,
it goes to the voter.
yeah, we
The same
go,
voters that we dropped 10 cents last time and then had to do a special election because.
Okay.
it failed.
Yeah.
So that's our problem. That's the catch-22.
Okay.
So raising it would be, in my opinion, and I agree 100% with what David has said. I agree with everything he just said, 100%, because I've been watching it for 12 years now. So we obviously can't double that rate for the obvious reason. The citizens are just going to vote it down. There's no doubt in my mind. So we have to raise it a little bit, and we have to write tickets,
Yeah, I think
which is the revenue, that's
Well,
the unspoken revenue, really.
I think the way David Johnson phrased it was manage the police department.
Yeah, because we all know the options, like there's that third option that nobody's talking about.
I know.
That's the only other option.
There is a third option, I didn't bring that.
Well, I mean, but it's like, that's the fiscally responsible budget committee kind of conversations that nobody wants to have, but that's what we're here for. And that's like a slap in the face, what we just heard. And it's, I'll take total responsibility for it too, because you make assumptions, but
But it's
it's
not,
hard
this
numbers.
has been an ongoing problem for 12 years.
Right.
We've had to transfer monies to the general, or to the police, department.
Well, but now, yeah.
Wait,
And
so
the test that we did failed.
So representing the citizens here, and maybe when I called the police department, I had a transient person dump some stuff. The police chief called me back. They were here. One time, we had COVID. This was during COVID. A police officer smelled propane, called the fire department. My partner and I couldn't smell. We didn't know propane was leaking in our property. We didn't pay any citations. Take that out of my tax. I'll pay money for what the police department's doing for us. I mean, they provide such a great service. Sorry, I'm getting a little.
absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and we all do.
Yeah, no, we're just speaking from past election experience of, wow, I can't believe it's so close. I can't believe it's like 2 or 3% every time we put it up there, so.
It's tough. Some people will, there are some people, one year we had a lot of business theft, and the business people were saying, what are we paying for? But, you know, of course, that's not the policeman's fault that people are going in at 3, 4 in the morning and breaking the window at the liquor store and, you know, those kinds of things. But we've been on the edge with this police levy for a lot of years. It doesn't just pass with flying colors.
Okay, so when I heard someone say we could raise the levy amount, I thought that was just a vote of the city council. It's something, so that's, again, so when the suggestion was made to raise that permanent rate, it means to go to the voters, to put it on a ballot. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the final year of the current levy for public safety. So regardless, if it's going to continue, it will be a ballot question. And I believe the chief of police has requested some assistance in drafting the ballot question and those kind of things. So then it will be a question of what would be the rate when it does go out to the voters. And what I'm hearing is it should be more than $1.80 per thousand. Okay, very good.
Well, what we're hearing is if we don't do that or make some drastic changes, we're not sustaining our public safety. And now is the time to have this discussion on next year, unfortunately. But I guess we only have those couple options.
Well, also, if I'm not mistaken, the city council will make the same kind of decisions during their hearing on the budget and the local options. Isn't that correct? Very good. Well, again, this is the budget committee, but isn't it also the case that, you know, after the budget committee approves the budget, it goes to the city council for adoption, and also the questions on the permanent rate and also the question on the law enforcement levy, even though that will be to the voters in the fall.
Actually, they need to set the rate at the end of the budget meeting where they levy the tax.
Okay. Thank you.
So we need to make the decision here, what we're going to recommend to the council.
Mr. Johnson, do you have any estimate calculations? For instance, you mentioned if they doubled it, that would have X number of revenue. Do you have is there a, if they went to a 190, you know, how much revenue would that generate? If they went to 210, how much revenue, you know, do you have a way to calculate how much additional revenues would be generated by what percentage increase of the rate? And does the budget committee have any questions about that for Mr. Johnson?
Well, first of all, it's your question. It's a secret, highly guarded.
Okay. He's kept a lot of secrets from me.
A good way to think about it, I don't know, I like to do things in tens. So the assessed value of the city is 157 million. So if you were to raise the rate 10 cents, you would bring in 15,700. So every 10 cents is 15,000. Where I come up with double, I mean, I just looked at the budget of the police department.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, I think, yeah, we go up 25%, we're still 75% behind. That is the math on that. Yeah, everything's a gain.
Well, it's gonna be multiple adjustments, sorry, because
The proposed public safety budget is 622,000. And currently, the local option funds 282,000 of that. So that's where I kind of just said double it because it's almost half. It's not yet. Doubling it would pretty close to get it.
That's 380. But in a perfect world, like the whole reason we got that other officer was because it was sustainable. I mean, that's the whole precedent of it, so. Right, oh no, well, like, what was it, 4 years ago?
we're at
you look, he's the one who wrote the tickets. He's the one who wrote the 300 tickets everyone wrote for the 25.
No, that's what I mean, like, that's where the gap is. That's what we're supposed putting around is the fact that what we thought was gonna happen didn't happen. Regardless of the how, the lag covered, whatever it is, we thought we were gonna be able to sustain 1.5 officers with the program that we had, and that is not working.
Yeah, but the officer we hired for this public safety is one who's been writing. He's been funding his own position. We just haven't been able to fund, he's been overly funding his.
But he's supposed to fund,
I think he has. When you look how many tickets he wrote,
Okay.
he's wrote almost 10 times as many as the next person.
yeah, but I like that, obviously, but the cost of doing business in the police department, like David pointed out, all those costs are killing us.
Well, if we didn't have him to write those tickets,
I agree with
then
you.
we wouldn't have any.
I'm not advocating for losing anybody. I'm just, we obviously need to make some adjustments. I personally don't think we'd pass a levy at $3, honestly. What do you think, David, after seeing that? Yeah.
Is David, would it be sustainable if we had the ticket revenue that we thought we were gonna get a couple of years ago? Is that still, if we had those numbers that we had when we made the change, would it pay for public safety? Like we had thought it would?
No, I didn't follow you all the way.
Well, when we switched, when we got the fourth officer, that was because it was, they funded the 1.5 officers and that's how it was sold. So if we had those ticket numbers that we had at that time, would that pay for the public safety? Or even in a perfect world, we'd still be short if we had the ticket numbers that we used to have?
I think I kind of understood.
Yes, I did.
If they could write 270,000, you wouldn't even have to increase the, on average, the citations are, the basic citation 165. And some of them were written 400 and some. It seems like the average is about 210. And I was just curious how,
Right, extra $4,000. More than double the amount of tickets already written. This year.
But they historically have done it. But this problem, like I said, has been going back for years and years and years. I mean, one year we hired an extra officer to write the tickets for himself to fulfill that job, and he ended up going out on a long-term workman's comp injury. And that when he's on workman's comp, he can't write tickets. So this is the kind of problem we've been fighting for a lot of years.
Well, don't forget, we can't say, you need to write more
No, I know
tickets.
that.
We have a quota, we have to-
Well, if I could, just my experience, I came from Curry County, and they also had a similar concept with a program called code enforcement, which was the non-criminal codes, and you can write citations based on your ordinances and regulations and things like that. And they hired some code enforcement people thinking that it would be a program that could at least cover its own costs, and it didn't happen. And I think if the city council and the budget committee here know that we were having them do our code enforcement here, and that just didn't happen.
It was a lot of money a month.
Yeah, so they don't have the code enforcement program for us to even have an option on. The funny part is, I had people tell me that, again, they said the reason we don't have code enforcement is because the people who are here at the city, we are violators ourselves, and we don't want it. And again, I had to say, no, it's because the county did away with the program. And, so you'll never be able to stop people from pointing fingers at you and saying this kind of thing when you're in the public office. But yes, those are the two reasons why, hiring enforcement to fund enforcement aren't good. One, quotas, and two, it's really not much of a guarantee as an outcome because, also law enforcement is doing a lot of social work nowadays, which isn't really citable. And, you're dealing with a lot of people who have no money to pay a citation anyway. So I just think you want to hire public safety for public safety, and the revenue is, more or less a side effect. And I think hopefully it's an inevitability because human nature, you're always going to have lawbreakers out there. But yeah, so the council has some decisions, or the budget committee. So at the end, there would be a motion to, we're getting a recommendation to increase it. You've heard it's $15,000 for every 10 cents they raise it. Is that correct, David? 15,000 for every 10 cents?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the math, and it's at 180 now. And so if you want 30,000, you'd raise it 30 cents? 20 cents? Okay, good. So there you go. So if it went to $2, you'd get another 30. Anyway, so that's just some of the math for you to think about, and we'll do that at the end. Are we ready to move on to another fund?
I'm just curious now, writing tickets isn't slowing people down because they're coming through not realizing that they're getting a ticket. So at one time, ODOT was going to provide a speed limit sign if we bought one. So it was $10,000. If we had a speed sign at each end of the town, that would probably slow people down.
I thought that was the plan.
We do have flashing yellow lights at each of the towns. No, I understand what you're saying, but
But we didn't approve it.
no, we have them currently. Drive out of town and drive in. There's flashing yellow lights that say 30 miles an hour.
I have
No, it says the ones that say you're
You're-
You're going, yeah, they're
Yeah.
going 45,
Yeah.
it's saying that it's a 30-mile.
Yes.
The other thing that is very effective, and I don't think they're as controversial as they used to be, but it's the radar cameras. And so they're kind of, I don't want to say ubiquitous, but they're pretty much everywhere now. But I think the state laws prevent them from being installed in certain places. And if you like, I can talk to our state elected officials and see if they can broaden that program. But I think those actually have a decent effect on things. I'd have to check, but if you like, I can check with the state representative to see if there's any way, because I think they were put out on an experimental basis, and I don't know.
They're all over Salem.
Okay,
You get an HD picture of yourself smiling as you go into.
it's just a thought. I'll be happy to talk to the state reps if that's something you want me to do.
I personally would be interested to know how many people on the coast are using them, because we're already labeled a speed trap, which we're not. That's just, it's on the internet. But I don't want to be the only city on the coast
Sure.
that utilizes that.
Okay, well, I'll do some research into that.
Well, and I just think about going into Bandon and you have that radar sign telling you that you're.
Yeah, I think that's another tool, but I do think also that those flashing lights, I mean, we got people going 50, 60, 70 miles an hour through town, then they just don't ignore the flashing lights. I don't think
No,
it's
but they
that.
see their speed, it's 55, and it just says it needs to be 30.
Just remember, there's a meeting stop.
And we're getting into council
Yep.
conversations instead of.
Well, I'm just wondering how we're gonna deal with whether we need that officer that's writing tickets if it's not paying on, and it's not slowing people down.
Those 400 versus the 110 and 5. You got 90% of the ticket.
I can have a discussion with the chief.
Yeah, well, there have been other challenges like John brought up. I mean, really, we've asked our police officers to be mental health specialists, which we know takes up a lot of their time. I mean, read the police report on a regular basis like I do. You can see, we know what they're doing. They're busy. But
We're talking about numbers. though.
we're talking.
We're not, like, there's no question about
I
that, or
agree.
anything like that, but when you hear,
Yeah,
we're not
I agree.
paying this debt, that's the scary
Yeah.
part.
Okay, well, I think you know what question is before you, and so at the end, when it comes time for a motion, motion. I assume someone will make a motion and it'll have a number attached and then you can deliberate and vote. But if you're ready to go to another fund, I think the next fund is tab number 4, is at the Water Enterprise Fund. And I think this was also a fund that was being assisted by the general fund, and we have resolved that somewhat by the proposal to do an interfund loan from the Sewer Enterprise Fund to the tune of $150,000, and that will help to alleviate the general fund contributions to the Water Enterprise Fund. And that loan would have to be paid back, and therefore, as you saw, we're going to recommend a rate increase in the water for the city council.
Can I chime in on that? So we haven't had an increase in 2 years. So we were supposed to have one last year, and we even recommended it, and it just didn't, it fell through the cracks pretty much. But this looks like, based on your numbers, we'll correct that and pay that loan back, David, because we're not supposed to make money on a water and a sewer fund.
And that's a long story.
Okay.
When I started working up the proposed rate change, and before I get going, that increase to the water bills does not include the $6 a month per water meter for water meter. So
Correct.
that goes in.
Correct.
But when I was back up, I'm looking at the resources on water and pricing. You can see how between 21 and 22, it lost 25,000. Between 22 and 23, it lost another, actually 30,000. And so that's kind of numbers I worked with. When I pulled the consumption report, I was getting some numbers that are not, I didn't feel confident with. When I bet we were selling pretty steadily 28 million gallons a year.
Mm-hmm.
This report said there would be 39 million. It also said there was 670 pounds that are billed every month, and it was pretty steady 650. So I ran my projections conservatively, because I'm not confident with that. So it may not be enough to stop the bleeding. And there's not enough money in there to pay the loan back. That's going to be a next year.
But it gets us close. So when you left, so just looking at building in Port Orford, I feel like we built 20 homes since you left. Yeah, so the number of 650 when you left and 670 now, I personally don't question as much, because I think we have probably built 20 homes without going back and looking.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even more, you're saying?
Oh, I'd say, yeah, that's not it.
Yeah, it's weird too, is we have 780 connections. So I'm confused.
Yeah.
780 connections, but only billed 690.
You get a lot of inactive meters. There's always been a large number of meters. Every month, it seems like 650 was the number of active
Yeah.
meters.
Yeah, that's probably increased 20.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think, and you would know better.
Yeah, we've done a lot in the last 2 years.
If I could,
But then that still doesn't correlate with an additional 10 million gallons.
I agree with you on that. That's a big question.
if I could, there was discussion about meters, and so the Water Enterprise Fund, it does have a increased revenue from a $6 a meter charge, and then it would also show a $6 a meter expense as well. So what you heard earlier, we talked about a BRIC grant when we were talking about the engineering, and the BRIC grant is primarily to bring our water system into this century or maybe even into last century. But what we're trying, and so part of that, and it's written into the grant proposal, because what the people who are thinking of giving us money want to know is, what else are you going to do? And we've told them we are going to upgrade our meters. And so apparently some of our meters are leaky, and some of our meters don't register correctly and that kind of thing. So we have a company who will give the city the meters, and they'll all be new, and they'll have this stuff called telemetry, which means there'll be a radio broadcast between the meter and our billing software that they will also provide for us. And the exchange then is a $6 per meter charge to the city, which we would pass to the customer. So the customer's bill would go up by $6 a month, and then we would pass that on to the company. What we get is water savings through no leaks. We get accurate sales and leak detection as well. So because what that'll do is that will help our water system be more reliable, and that's the idea behind the meter replacement. So it's a responsible thing to do, and it'll be a charge that's passed on to customers. So that's the other part of the water enterprise fund budget. And if there's no other questions on the water enterprise fund, there's not much to talk about in water capital reserves, I don't think.
I got a question real quick.
Oh, okay.
Hey, David, where are we falling short on the water fund? Where are we losing? Where are we going backwards? Is it on the sales of water or repairs and maintenance, or?
You're asking where we're short?
No, yeah, why are we losing it? Me and Gary Millman had a conversation about this, where we were funding the water through the general fund, a portion of it, because we were short.
Well,
Can you tell me, I mean, is it something that we can correct that we're doing, whether it's chemicals? I don't know. I don't know how to define why we're short. Is it revenue coming in from the water sales?
I think you can see that you're doing a real good job of trying to keep costs down. It's not the cost that was the problem. It was the lack of not making a rate increase.
Okay. Yeah, that's just for my information in case I'm missing something, so I can.
The council had passed a resolution allowing the budget committee to increase the rates every year. We always try to stay on top of it, because it's a balancing act, try not to make money and whatnot.
COVID, I think, got us on the first one where we didn't increase. We felt as a budget committee, it would be best not to, I think. And then the last year, I think it just slipped through the cracks, to be honest with you. And I think last year just topped us off, pushed us up over the edge.
Well, last year we were kind of holding off because we wanted to figure out what the meters were going to do. We know how much new meters is going to change people's bills.
Right.
And they're reading slow, they're not reading fast. So there's going to be a huge, not huge, but there's definitely going to be some higher bills.
Increase, yeah.
There's maybe detecting your big
And
leaks.
John, if you would stop and think about it, 25,000 out of a $500,000 budget is not much. It's just the fact that it went on for several years. This would be the third year.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So then,
But-
oh, I'm sorry.
So what about all the fines that people were getting for using too much water? That didn't help increase our water.
A little bit.
I think it was
I mean, I know I was getting fined.
19.
It was like 19,000.
We're on the subject, but I'll just give you a tidbit. We have a list for this metering this month. There's quite a few homes, 40K plus. So.
Worth of water?
Mhm.
Yeah, because they're
10 to 15 times what they should be.
Yeah, because they're doing their garden. So that's what we're trying to do.
So
It's not talking, you can have a 50 by 50 garden and use about 7,000 gallons a month. I know. for
40,000
Toilets,
gallons.
leaky toilets.
leaking toilets, I think when we go out for funding, they call an equivalent dwelling unit is 3,700 gallons, 3,700 per resident. And 40,000 flows that out of the water. So,
And that's the price of it.
If you look on the tab number 4, and you look at the Water Enterprise Fund revenues, the first page under tab number 4, revenues, you might have, are you on 4 yet? Look on, is it the first page? It might be stuck to the back of the tab, I'm not sure. No, it should sit right there. So does it say Water Enterprise Fund and then resources? And then if you go down to, I think, line 12, water curtailment fees,
Oh, okay.
you can
All right,
see,
thank you.
we,
38,000.
yeah, and then we're not budgeting any for the next year. So that, yeah, so we did, it did come
Happy
in.
with that.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Kansas City lost money on that deal. I don't mean, last water sales, obviously. I have questions about it. I don't know what time it is.
Okay. How, speaking of time, how are we doing on time? Do we need to extend the meeting or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, well, there's nothing for me to talk about on water capital reserves or even the sewer enterprise fund. It's, really status quo, and it's nothing in the sewer capital reserves. Everything is normal there. I don't think there's any large surprises in the street fund. And then, yeah, really.
Well, we transfer 150,000.
Sure, is that the, yeah. So really, that's the equipment replacement fund. We've got 40,000 budgeted for a new vehicle.
For water truck.
So, yeah, that, we had 100,000+ in there, I don't see the total of 40K, so that means another 100 that we have to save.
Well, just go back to the general fund, probably. You know what I mean?
You know, we were contributing to that every budget cycle, but I understood it. We have enough money for it.
what's it you?
600 grand.
Yeah.
So that is correct. We did, I thought it was close to 100,000
I thought it was.
for that. David probably can explain this. Going back to John.
Service vehicle capital outlay.
What,
It's on page 10.
I don't have any use
we don't have
Tab 10.
Tab 10.
Tab 10. Tab 10. Number 7, the service vehicle, there's your 40,000 that it looks like we have.
separate the truck.
Right, and he's saying that fund last year had somewhere around 100,000.
Yeah, it used to be somewhere else, but it would be in that one, right? It'd be in that tab.
transfer from 64 to 60. I don't know.
So I think that is correct. It was larger than that. Remember, you made that equipment fund, the 4 replacement on the back on truck before you had left.
I see, it's the total of the bottom is 180.
Okay.
So is that where we're at with the 40, right?
And
It was 96 in 2022, 23.
Future expenditure reserves.
That's what I'm looking
Future
at.
expenditures is 78.
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay, so you're talking about the 40 plus the 70. That might be plus the 200.
Basically, we got 120 in the total.
Well, and it looks like the transfer didn't get made last year either, so that would skew your number too. Of thinking, oh, we approved 134,000, but obviously that transfer didn't.
Right, that's what I remember. Was 134, so. Yes. You guys don't money again. I don't know.
I think that.
And you're correct that the transfer from water and sewer, both of those were not made. Sewer could still be made, but I would recommend not making water.
Right.
Don't have money to do it. Sewer could still transfer to 10.
So are you saying then on line item 3, we don't want to do the water transfer, David?
No, we're upside
Yeah, we can go ahead, the council adopted for a $10,000 transfer. We can go ahead and do that this year.
Okay,
Leave that another 10,000 for next year.
okay,
So
okay, I understand what you're saying.
that would change the sewer fund, of course. But it's all doable, and I'll take care of it.
Okay. So do we need to make note of that change now for when we adopt the budget?
We can make those changes now, of course. So if we do the 10,000 in there, that would increase the cash out in equipment replacement. That increased the cash forward to 105,638. And were you gonna want more money appropriations, or are we putting it in unappropriated?
Does that mean, is he gonna buy the VACON this year?
He's not gonna buy it this year, obviously.
Coming up, not before the end of 2020, before, in 30 days, but I mean, in the upcoming year, in the next budget period.
You have to look at Washington. There's somewhere between 1 to 2 years left on the deal.
Okay,
I'll say that.
very good. So this would just be, funding future. Okay, good, thank you.
It's not gonna keep that.
Maybe, I hope not.
Don't say that.
We can throw some flex seal in.
How much is that?
We used one for probably 2.5, 300, and new one about 700,000.
Well, we don't think we cover it, like,
I have been, trust me, I'm scanning them.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah, Dave's a good guy to be friends with on that.
That'll make yourself under there.
Oh, good.
I know the safe sites.
Good. I think you guys are using it.
Which kind of brings me,
I guess I'm on tab 1. Maybe I'm.
geez, that's good for. Well, it's because this program it's just stuck in my head when I first looked at it.
What page you about?
101.
Tab one.
Tab one, 101.
What line item?
Tab 1, last page of tab 1. Line item. Where are you at? Oh, 10. I know we just did that contract, and I remember it raising quite a bit, but it just looks like, I mean,
14,000.
14,000.
It was like $1,000 a month, I remember that. More.
right, but I mean, it is, there's, but it was only 10,000 the year before, so I'm just noting that, so we can keep that number in our head in the future.
Was it 2021? Was it 2021? It was half that.
Right, and that's what we renegotiated the contract, and it was this 1 year long, robust discussion, and I don't think, I don't think the library's super happy, and that's probably why my eyes stuck on this line item. So it's just something we need to keep a tab on, I guess, is all I'm saying. It is what it is, it's a contract, we have to.
So there's two things. Of course, the contract year over year had a gradient increase where the percentage they received went up, and then the percentages of assessed value, and those also went up. So you've got a double compounding.
Well, just looking at it, it could get ugly.
Well, I think I can't remember, when is it, is we in the last year of it or something, or does it continue?
I can't remember,
Okay.
we'd have to pull that contract up, but it's like, Pat chose some very colorful words too. It was exciting.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it at that.
Colorful words for the meetings.
Yeah. Well, but it's a formula.
Right, no, I just had, like, it's just when the numbers change like that happen.
But it's because the rate went up and the values went up. So it's, again, it's kind of a double thing. Could we take a brief recess? Does anyone else besides me need a recess and then come back and kind of wrap up? Because I feel like I presented everything, and maybe a recess would help you kind of gather your thoughts and then come back in and do a motion. Is that okay? Can we take 10 minutes, Mr. Mayor? 5?
That's fifty now.
Oh, Michelle. What time, what is it?
7:05.
7:05, and so we could get out of here within the 2 hours. If you come back at 10 after? Thank you. Yeah.
Suggested that we bring it in.
Yeah.
So there was difference.
Just, it went from 35, 7. Yeah, literally. Was it Sue?
Kind of interesting. People in fire district are, so I didn't want to tell that. People in the city. In the city, you only pay 60.
The police have been such a issue.
We're on the house, they've already
Oh, yeah.
gone
I've been here just 3 years.
We could double their
So
rate,
years ago.
we could double the city people's rate.
That's one reason.
But then we get screwed through it at the water rate.
Because we were.
Yeah, so like
this. When we were doing it,
And the only law enforcement we have
to meet that,
is sheriff. And most of the something happens. We're just, yeah, so, I mean, a lot of people rallied together. Actually had a
So why?
what they call committees that you, one of those,
Oh, wow.
PAC, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was a long time ago, yeah. Oh, God. And so just really, really handing out flyers at the grocery store, you know, and it passed. We were, I can remember we were together, we're getting the results after, it was like, because we really did not think of it. Because, well, there's, they don't want anyone anywhere. Yeah, but it's still a thing, you know, yeah, and it's like, yeah, and so that whole police force issue is like, yeah, and even raising, you know, raising anything, anything, it's such a matter, and there will be an uproar. And
No, I get it.
you have
Budget meetings are always
I mean,
fun.
you have to.
Budget meetings are always fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not mad, I just,
And that was.
I didn't know
We were
that-
talking about putting the signs at the buildings out
I didn't know that we
there.
would
Things and say that you're
qualify
going
to get more for the sheet, you know, like,
Yeah, but that's those.
this is cool.
And you're not gonna have a ticket.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I'm not gonna. Yeah. Like, but it's that kind of, you know, you gotta walk through all of those
I
things.
didn't
That's
know
kind
that.
of what they did for years. They used to be involved. And then there were a few issues
I was like-
that happened, and I said, I will never go back. And then I went back to one. It was in 2014, because I got laid off from work. And I thought, okay, well, it's not back.
So,
And I went to this one that I did after that. And I went home and said, I'm not going back here. But Gary called me and said, could you show up? Because we need somebody else to be there. But I feel like I've come in on the, and I have come in on the very end and I. Yeah, this is our first. Is it your first? Yeah. Yeah. So it's like.
25.
Yeah.
It's 25. It's ours to use. That's an old second.
I feel like watching this group
That's what.
gives me so much hope because there's so much
So
more
that.
than what I experienced. She actually, when I had the that committee, she actually was gonna help me with some stuff, but she couldn't because her husband was a counselor. Well, I mean, they live out of town and he was a counselor because he had a company that he said he was living in Anyhow, yeah, that was one of those crazy things, but no, it's, no, I spent that day, they were interviewing a.
That was fundraising.
Police chief.
That was fundraising.
One day, you know, all interviewed
Well,
four people. They interviewed him as a whole day.
I think we're close, Mr. Mayor, pretty close.
And.
we just gotta get it started with mine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm just happy to be where I'm at, where we are.
And the other guy got it.
And I just, I always have to ask questions from the members. That's just my.
That's, again, I'm glad you do, and I, trust me, I had all the same questions as you in preparing this, and I learned a lot talking. It was nice. Just sitting in the room.
It's one of those, it's like a different language, it's like you kind of have to learn. It's 12 years.
Well, I think we're ready to really get started. I don't know if you want to knock that thing.
Okay.
So, again, thanks to the budget committee for, all the input. I think that's been staff's presentation. And so what I'm going to do is I have one last question. It's going to we're going to circle back to something we talked about in the beginning, which was the wish list. And if you look at the top one on there, the room, the general fund for the city hall. So city hall, if you know, facilities maintenance is the job of our public works department here, which is John Isidore is in the room with us. And then the other thing we talked about was the last budget included a large dollar figure, and on the wish list was not granted any of the engineering for the water projects and the brick grant. And I've talked to John and I've talked to the engineer, and essentially, again, John runs the water, John runs the facilities maintenance. And so, you know, as a budget person, it's like, what would the person in charge of these things prefer? And I've talked to John, and I think what he would recommend, and I'll have him speak to it, but I think he would look on this wish list and say perhaps taking the city hall and putting it to the water engineering and keeping that water engineering project to fix our water system moving down the road in a timely fashion, especially with terms of our grant. And so, John, do you have, if we were going to make a motion to approve the budget with some amendments, would the amendment be to change the line item on the roof and any other line items and put those towards the water department? So a transfer from general, we just talked about a transfer from the general fund in this budget period, but for the next one that we're considering adopting, do you have anything on that wish list, being the person in charge of our roofs and our roads? If you had money to go from roofs to roads, what would that be?
Well, I think the city hall roof, they had the seams done last year, they seem to be holding, they didn't have leaks this winter. So, talking with Buddy, or Bubba, he figured, he said we got about 10 years, 8 to 10 years, seams are failing, but we have the seams repaired. So I think we should melt that one along for a while, get the insurance out of it, and take that money to the water improvement. I really do think that's money well spent there. You know, we have a emergency or something, we'll come out and get seam sealed and repaired. Obviously, if there's a true emergency, we'll find the funds somewhere to plug the hole. And I think that the community roof, to be honest, it's not going to be 44 grand. I think I didn't want to own this, but I think the labor from public works probably the streets and I think we can cut that down. I don't want to.
The interesting part about that, though, that's parks fund, and that might be, but also I don't want to get too fancy, but I think that's parks funds money, which is TLT, which I don't, but it's TLT, and I don't think you can. I also don't think you can spend TLT on the water.
Now, we were told that there was $3 million.
So I think that's the LGIP or something, and I think in the local government investment pool, but David, do you want to go through an explanation of what that means and whether that has any bearing on budgeting or how it does?
You say the city having $3 million.
Yeah.
Okay. I turned in my bill and the city only has $1 million.
Money well spent.
The city collectively has 2.5 million current, the 3 million top. It has that money, but it's different funds, different restrictions. So water and sewer SDCs are, you cannot spend that money except for very specific. So the bottom line of the story is you have $3 million, but each fund only has a certain share of that pot. What Parks has can't be transferred anywhere. The only fund we can transfer is the general fund. Water can transfer to Water Capital Reserve because Water Capital Reserve is a sister fund of water enterprise, same sewer, and the SDC being part of that. So the city does have the money. It's just the fund it's in and the restrictions on using it and all the people that.
So John, I would say if there were projects in the water fund that you could put towards water use other than roofs and such, and I don't know if that's under the 030, like near the bottom of that page.
While you're thinking about that, can I ask David a question?
Yes, absolutely.
David, I think I remember that we couldn't use TLT money on the maintenance of city-owned buildings. Is that something
That's a good question, 'cause I want to ask TLT stuff about the visitors.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
It's always been my understanding in that I thought it was a TLT grant could not be used on.
And that's probably what, exactly. Very, very good, very good. That answers the question.
It's tourism and tourism related facilities. So if we have a tourism related facility,
It's just why I was always confused, but now I remember exactly why.
grant,
Can we use
The grant money.
the visitor center is what the key here.
Yeah.
Because that's a tourism thing.
Yeah.
It would be nice to, as the parks department, put some money, like the $10,000 into rehabbing that, using the TLT money. We just didn't know, do we got to put in a request to the TLT committee to spend that money as the city, as the parks department? Or how would the parks department go about getting some of that money of that extra? You see what I'm saying?
Well, first of all, let's address the TLT grant.
Okay.
It cannot be given to the city.
Okay.
Now, to get you that money, well, you're part of Park has the TLT money. You already have it. Why do you need to give it to yourself?
so right, the TLT grant is also, didn't we just limit how much money we were going to give out for the non-city uses?
So there's still money in it.
Parks.
This one.
Is that Jubilee money gonna hurt parks in the
No.
future? I mean, in future conversations, like that is $15,000 that people will assume is gonna be allocated to parks every year. And then maybe next year they'll be like, oh, well, we're putting 15,000 to parks, so sorry, all your park projects, you're gonna have to eat it because we're worried about fire.
It looks like the parks is a pretty hefty budget each year that we haven't been spending. You know,
But
for
you're
a while.
wanting to spend.
I understand it, but that's what I'm saying.
That 38,000 is gonna come back as 38,000.
I get that. I know, I totally understand.
I'm just throwing that out there because now would be the time to start a TLT fund or put it in another pocket that I'm just.
No, I want to know.
Wouldn't it be better to put in the budget for the fireworks?
Well,
Where the money's going?
I think that's what the Jubilee is.
That's what this is making, is a line item in the parks budget for the Jubilee.
But that means it's there every year.
Well, it means it's there for this year, and we can take it out next.
Correct.
Next year.
It's only there for 23, 24.
they're using more than that, but that covers the fireworks.
I was just curious.
The fireworks.
That covers pretty much the fireworks, and they fundraise with their other stuff, with their shirts and t-shirts.
We're coming up on the witching hour, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
if I heard you correctly, John asked for this line to be created. I'm in the Parks Fund, and it's called Jubilee, $15,000. That would cover the fireworks.
We just didn't know that is that $15,000 each year sustainable for parks to keep doing? That's.
So,
No, I just didn't want, when we're talking these thoughts in the future, I didn't want the budget to be like, oh, well, we're not gonna give you that because you gotta, I didn't want to hurt a future park project by tying that in. It's just like.
So that is one.
Okay, so where are we at, John?
I have one question. So we made an ordinance 2 or 3 years, probably 4 years ago, to give the Jubilee 5,000 out of the TLT money. So we're not giving them 5,000 plus 15,000. I just want to make that clear. So how do we make that ordinance go away?
Well, I don't know that you need to, because this is a budget item where you're setting aside money to go to a direction, but this is not, anything you do here is not a spending decision. It's allocating money for a purpose.
Correct.
So all you're doing is allocating it, but that doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to have that much money. So in other words, if I recall the discussion when the Jubilee people came to the city council, it was where can we get the money? So all staff did is listen to that and said, we are going to create a place where you can get the money if you do decide to spend it. Now that doesn't mean then that you have to spend it all. And so but it gives you the flexibility where before your hands were tied, if we don't have it. Now we're saying, here's something if you want to.
So, but we still have an ordinance that says we will give them 5,000 a year. So this would be up and above that $5,000. I mean, I will try to get on board for 15, but I'm not getting on board for 20 is what I'm trying to say.
Right, and I don't think you're bound, by doing this, you're not bound to get on board for 20.
Okay.
I don't think the Jubilee's gonna come and ask for that additional 5,000. I understand.
Yeah, but it's not a problem with today's council. It's a problem 5 years down the road where they come to you and they interpret it as, hey, we were supposed to get 5 and 15. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and in fact,
We're not gonna be here forever.
because when they came, they had the 5,000 and then they asked for 5,000 more and then things languished, so they asked for another 5,000 and they're ending up with 15,000 on their budget, but were they coming asking for 10 total originally? They were. And so and they almost said that in the meeting of, oh, well, we asked for it because we could.
I would feel more comfortable with 10.
Well, we can.
But like this,
But for this year's budget, for me personally, I'd rather this be funded going forward and we can look at it. It's not hurting our parks budget. We have an 80, with that 15,000, we still have an 80,000, 87,000. We have 170,000 parks reserves.
I totally understand that. But the way I look at things is we have this public safety that we're short 200 or 300,000. That's the way I think of it. Yeah, and it's has nothing to do with whether it's Jubilee asking for it or Circle K.
So the ordinance is ongoing?
We agreed about 4 years ago to give them 5,000 a year.
Every year.
So what that did is it gave them the money in advance to purchase the first down payment for their fireworks.
So then this is an additional 15,000.
I hope it's not.
I mean, that's what's.
I mean, if it is, I can't.
this all goes back into our monthly reporting, like the detail sheet that we should, like the transaction sheet that we should be getting, that Fort Dane spent hours and hours and hours of his life of people asking them. That's the control we have over those kind of expenditures. We're doing our due diligence, and yeah, even though it's budgeted, we're not gonna remember it. We'll just be like, oh, it's this $10,000 check to park. So we'll be covered if we take the right actions with our report.
So what happened to the 5,000? No, what happened during COVID when we didn't have the Jubilee for 2 years?
They rolled it over.
Okay.
Rolled it over and evidently it's spent because they don't have money this year.
It was, well, but also that fireworks cost them 15,000.
Now,
They, well, even back then, 2 years ago, it was still $12,000. So
They never got the full amount. They had to fundraise. So they're trying to get the full amount for just fireworks and fundraise for all the rest of the stuff. That's what it seems like.
Well, we still have the final call on this, and we might get a little more information.
I see both sides of the equation. These folks are volunteers, they're trying super hard to bring people to Port Orford, which supports all the businesses. I get it, I totally get it. We also, though, we're elected to be fiscally responsible.
And I'll be the devil's advocate and say that for 25 years, there was a Jubilee committee that did a heck of a lot of fundraising.
And they're still-
stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that
Right.
they're not, I just maybe in things get disproportionate, maybe fireworks.
There's three on there right now. 3 people trying to do it.
So,
No,
if I remember right, the fire department puts the order in for fireworks right after. So they kind of have an idea of what they need ahead of time. So maybe it could be or Jubilee, that they'll get the request in by March. Otherwise, they're.
I hate to say it, this year, the request, our code actually says they have to have the requests in by February. The requests were in by February, and staff, for who knows what reason, didn't even act on them. Oh, by the way, we also had a meeting with the the TLT grant committee. We didn't have a quorum, only one person showed up, so they couldn't really make any decisions. And so we're going to come to the city council with all 3 of those grant requests with options for the city council to make decision on the 15th. So, but I personally might want to relook at the TLT ordinance in light of a couple things. 1, the difficulty we have staffing the committee, and 2, the actual increase in revenue that we're experiencing, because I think it isn't just hotels anymore. I think we're getting them from the vacation rental people now, and the Airbnbs are now, all those are now doing it. So I think, again, I don't want to get bogged down on this item. We can easily change that line item to 10 instead, if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, if the budget committee wants staff to look at the TLT ordinance in light of the revenues and the changes and bring some things back to the city council to reconsider, how the TLT is managed, happy to do that. But what I'd really like to do, because we're getting to the 2-hour limit, is either make a motion to continue, or I would like to ask for motions to approve some things. I listened, and I think I have a motion that I could request. I'd say it slowly so Joseph could write it down. And that one motion would be on the budget. And then there could be a motion, deliberations, amendments, vote, what have you. The other motion would be on the permanent rate, and the other motion would be on the local option. So those would be the 3 motions I'd be looking for. And so if you're ready, I would move that you approve the budget as proposed in the amount of, excuse me, this is going to be on the very last page here in the summary. It's at the very back of the binder. And the budget amount is $6,120,232 total. And the only change that I would propose, well, there would be, I think, the transfer of the 10,000 was in the current budget period. It doesn't have to do with the 20. We were just talking about that water transfer to carry out the transfers that were in last year's budget. That's good. But so that wouldn't have to change. But the one change would be to change take the $85,000 from the general fund that was dedicated for the city hall roof, and based on the input from our public works director, transfer that to the water fund for engineering for the grant. And so that would be really the motion I would have for the budget. Just to get things started, I'd be happy if someone would make that motion and have it get into discussion. And Tim Pavlovich, did you want to change the dollar on the Jubilee to 10?
I think that's something, personally, I think, council was trying to hash it out and we'll have to hash. I mean, if we budget for it, we budget for it, but council will hash it out the next meeting, obviously.
Okay,
We have a parks meeting tomorrow.
all right.
We have our
Okay.
meeting tomorrow.
So we'll leave that alone for this motion. Okay, so that's the motion I would request someone make unless you want to make a different motion. But I'm just trying to help us do our business today.
So we're not able to fund the 645,000.
Correct, and I have had a discussion with the engineer, and so what he did was give us a list of things he would, and he talked with John Isidore about the priorities, and what John is suggesting is that we take the 85 for the city hall roof, which he says has had a decent repair and hasn't leaked, and we wouldn't do the roof next year and put that towards engineering.
So we're not, none of the 645.
85,000 of it. We would, so yes, so the budget you have does not include $645,000 for engineering. And what we're proposing is taking.
Correct. But it includes everything else on this page.
Yes, and the next page.
Okay.
And so what we're saying is let's take the top one there.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was very confused because I thought we were talking about approving the 645, and I think as a council, there was a lot of people talking about pumping the brakes a little bit.
Good, so that's what we are doing.
What about the other side of it, though? Like, if we do 85,000, does that mean we're gonna get a bunch of 1/3 done projects? I'm only asking because I don't want to burn the 85,000. Like, what is that 85,000 get? Is it one complete project, or is it a tenth of all the brick grant stuff that we have going on?
Do you have, well, because you have this list. Well, I thought you have this list. You got this email? Okay, so.
As of the discussion today, he said he was what, 2/3 of the engineering on the priority 1 projects.
Right.
What we paid to date, I don't know.
2/3 of the way done with that?
That's the way I understood.
Well, we just got billed for another 90,000, I think. To date, I thought we spent around
Now,
that.
the priority 1 doesn't include the.
That's what we have to work on.
That's a separate deal. It's two
No, that's what I mean, but like,
Working on the raw water, and that was kind of where we left the conversation with, told them our priorities was the raw water, getting it dredged, back up to date.
Correct.
And then having some type of raw water storage.
Correct.
Did the dredging, right? So we can store that. And then having priority 1's,
Okay.
pipeline replacements, engineered.
So if I could, when you look at this list,
I don't know.
when you look at this list, this includes funding dredging the pond.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and this includes some other water treatments there, but it didn't include any engineering. So yeah, all we're proposing is instead of putting $85,000 for the roof in this building, which doesn't leak and we won't be repairing it, that John doesn't think we'll be repairing, we put that towards this. And that would fund at least the lakeshore replacement and possibly some of the hamlet, maybe some Dee and maybe some Wyoming and Arizona. So, and those are the priorities that have been listed.
And regardless, we know we only have 85,000 to slide over there for whatever reason anyways. And so if we want to have the discussion on which way we want to put it, we can do it at a later date. No, we only have the 85,000 anyways, so maybe it's.
I think it would be a good idea to have a workshop, have Marlon come down and explain exactly
Where we're at.
How much.
I agree.
On those last pieces.
I agree, because
I think the 645 was for Shabam, is what I understood.
now I'm okay putting the 85 there, but I personally am not saying we're spending it on any kind of engineering until we discuss with Marlon what is going on currently.
Very good.
I got one more question and then I'm ready to make a motion. But very bottom line, very last page. We're going to spend $4 million in the next month? If our year-to-date activity is 2,537,414 and our projected ending is 6,081,000, then. Very last page. Very last page, very last line.
So are you looking at the summation? Does it say summation?
I'm looking at the total, the proposed, yeah, summation.
Good. And then,
So like year-to-date activity is 2,537,000 with a projected ending of 6 million. So my question is, are we spending $4 million in the next 30 days?
Well, we said it in 2 days.
That's right. That does drive with what he said earlier, though. He said 2 million earlier, so, okay, good. Ready to make a motion.
He's like the guy who goes, no, I don't understand that either.
I think what the answer to your question is going to be,
Well, even,
in the activity column, you don't have any unappropriated, you don't have contingency, and you don't have the tax forward.
Okay, no, I just had that, so, cool.
Where's your $4 million?
Well, and I mean, the numbers add up, the big numbers add up with all the other years, so. It's
Did you guys understand the answer? Yeah, okay,
Okay,
all right.
so you want to entertain that you want to say that motion again?
Sure, it would be to approve the City of Port Orford 2023-24 budget as presented in the amount of $6,120,232 and simply change one line item from the City Hall roof of 85,000 and put that into the water fund for engineering.
So move.
I'll second that. There we go. That's all we need.
So if we approve it, so are we in discussion now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we approve that, then we really pretty much can't add anything else to the next budget meeting on our list, right? Well, I'm just asking because we're approving it the way it's.
Thank you. So if I could talk about the the budget process, thank you. What does the budget committee do? The budget committee sends this to the city council for consideration and deliberation. So this is the budget committee's recommendation to the city council, but the city council can accept or change the recommendation. So those of you on the city council will have another chance to take a sharp pencil to this budget if you so please. David Johnson has something to add.
So to the motion, does it also address the shortfall of public safety?
Well, there will be a second motion on the permanent rate and then a third motion on the public safety levy, I think, if that's what you mean.
The permanent rate would change the budget.
No, the permanent rate is the property tax rate. That's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to the public safety levy rate.
Oh, right.
Okay.
268.
Yeah, the permanent rate is the property taxes.
Correct.
And then the public safety levy. So there's going to be three things we talk about. One,
But the public safety levy could in fact change the budget.
well, let's talk about that. I mean, I'm not sure that it could act so quickly, right? I mean, if it would go to the voters, is that what we're saying?
It would start in November, I believe.
If it would have to pass as well, correct?
If it has to
So,
start in November
sure.
at the new rate.
Would it start in January? When you vote on something in November, does it become effective the following
I
January?
think it does, yeah.
Okay, so it would run for 6 months perhaps. So you might get, maybe 30, but I don't even know if that would require a budget amendment on let's they're talking about half a year of part of the whatever dollar figure they come up with on the public safety levy. So how would that play out on adopting this budget? If they wanted to recognize those revenues, so let's say hypothetically they adopt this budget. This budget does not include increased revenues for public safety based on passage of an additional tax rate. It doesn't include that.
I just think there's kind of a lack of direction for fixing public safety because it's not 100% raised rate. It's writing citations and then increasing transfers also.
Sure, I didn't hear anything about suggestions we increase transfers. I think,
Excuse me, sorry about that.
He just meant about the more general fund activity.
Yeah.
because of The citations
And that-
outside
oh, I
of
see.
the public safety, just that general fund activity. But there's math to that. If you said it's 15,000 for every 10 cents, we know that we have what, $6 million budget?
and we can go 10% over. I mean, so there is quite a bit, I mean, that could tell us how much we could make that motion for, which I'm tentatively not pumped at all personally, but 6 million, that's a lot of 15,000. So yeah, I mean, we could double it and still not even affect the budget. I mean, still be legal on the budget.
That's,
But I don't know, David's the guy, so if Dave's telling me that we need to think twice, I want to measure twice and cut one.
Well, it seems to me that the council wanting to make the changes when they adopt the budget is circumventing the budget committee. The whole purpose of having a budget committee meeting is to hear from the citizens what the city should be doing. And if you don't want to listen to them because you're going to change the council meeting, it just doesn't sound like good policy.
I haven't really heard that's what's going to happen. But right now, again, we're just requesting a motion on the budget. And if the budget committee then also wants to recommend to the city council that they raise the public safety levy rate, that's fine, but it's almost conservatively, I wouldn't want to budget for a receipt on a public safety levy that's going to the voters as a source of revenue to plan on spending, that you'll only get 6 months out of it, even if it passes. I'm just saying, certainly you can say, let's raise that levy, but to say, and therefore let's increase the revenue stream of the public safety, that I think is a more difficult lift. And I think what Mayor Pat has said is that even if we raised it and got, raised it 20 cents and got $30,000, that's a month, a year or something, and we're only going to get a half year, that's $15,000. That's not enough to even recognize as a budget amendment. So again, I feel like you're kind of getting bogged down on this public safety levy amount. I think it's valid to make a recommendation to the city council on, but to hold a budget adoption over it, I think is not a good use of time.
Well, it's so far in the future.
Yeah, and it's based on the possibility.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the public safety levy.
Just question, maybe I'm out of bounds here, but
You are.
a balance.
I'm joking. Sorry.
A balanced budget is knowing that we have everything covered in here, paying for everything. And I think that's what David's saying is we're not budgeting enough for the police officers right now, so it's not truly a balanced budget.
Right.
Well, it's balanced in that the general fund is subsidizing public safety, but public safety in a lot of places is a general fund account.
Yeah,
It's not, I mean, it's not a separate.
doesn't mean we're in the red, it just means that portion of the fund.
Right, and we're gonna allow the general fund to actually fund.
As far as the levy though, it's revenue, like we could, let's say it works out, and we go 360, as long as we don't expend more than we're supposed to, we're okay. And that would just be funds that we build up for the next budget cycle, but I'm missing something, I'm missing David's concerns, and I don't want to.
Thank you. Me too. I'm trying.
Because David's the guy that's been in the hot seat doing this for years and knows the ins and outs of it. And I'm looking at a way of, if we do this, this, and this, then we can get it done. And I just want to make sure that we, because I want to key in on the public, like you're trying to get us to key in on, because that's why we're all here for. And I'm missing.
Do you have a specific recommendation? Do you have a specific recommendation and a specific number for the budget committee to consider? Yes, I said, do you have a specific recommendation on a specific number for the budget committee to consider for the police levy, the law enforcement public safety levy?
Well, you gotta remember, first of all, that one of the duties of the budget committee is to levy the tax. So they have to, when they make the motion, make the decision if it's $1.80, $3.60, or $1.75. So it really, it's a decision that needs to be made now, so you know what tax to levy. And the question has to be submitted to the county, if I remember right, by August. In order
It's right now, we gotta get it to the county.
We didn't do this last year.
It's every 5 years and we're at the end of a
Oh,
5-year
that's why.
cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Newbie question.
So
Good.
the difficulty here is I think we're missing a little bit of David's message. I think his message isn't saying it's all about dollars. I think there's maybe other ways of looking at it. We have some adjustments to make that we're gonna have to sort out. It may not be going just to 360, maybe going lower and then trying to figure it out from there, which is gonna be difficult. But I'm here to tell you, Port Orford would not be the same place it is today if we did not have a police department. Within 6 months, it would be unrecognizable, without a doubt in my mind. So the one thing we gotta keep in mind is we have to figure out a way to sort this problem out, but it's not all about revenue, because if it is, we're just gonna force a no vote, honestly. And I would guess to say about 90% of the people in Port Orford support the police department. We might have 10% that don't for whatever reasons, and some of those go back to childhood, you know?
That's not what the ballots say. I mean, yeah, everybody we talk to is for the police force, but when it gets to the vote.
That's true.
It's easy. And we didn't make it, but we dropped it by a dime. So if we're talking about even raising it by a dime, that's a huge concern about making any of it.
Right, so yeah,
Like, the first thing is to get the police levy to pass,
Yeah.
or it's kind of a moot conversation.
right. So if you raise it and it doesn't pass, then you have zero instead of the revenue it brings in. So yeah, no.
And I think that might be what David's trying to say too, is this is a bigger problem than just this police levy. Like, we need to make adjustments in-house functionally and physically, and he doesn't want us to forget about that, along the way.
Correct.
So I think we're hearing what you're saying, hopefully. But does anybody see any way that we could raise this police levy and not worry about it, because I'm worried about it right now as it is.
I'm worried about it, but we were at 190 and we dropped it to 180.
It seems prudent to make an increase of like at least 220 or 250 or just $2 or something, because just the fact that it was low, it was higher and then it went lower and time has passed, it seems like it would make sense, like straight at $2. Some kind of increase that makes sense to the public.
It's failed. It's the reason why we lowered it that one.
They shut down the water line. But it's all in salesmanship too.
That's
Say
right.
$2,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
$2.
It has
We don't
how-
talk about
how
what it
it's
used to be
being
or what it was.
presented.
Like, for $2, you get this, and this in our community.
So the history was, Councilor Webb at the time suggested we go down to 180, and we all thought that would be a good deal. But the county, the state, they're very specific on what we can write on the ballot. So what we were told was a lot of folks thought, since we went down to 180, they thought it was 190 plus 180, and people voted it down. We had to go and meet at the community building and explain to folks that no, what we in fact did was lower it 10 cents. But we couldn't write that in the message that we had to legally.
Like social media and word of mouth and all the neighbor to neighbor, all that kind of stuff is gonna be the way that people. No, but I don't.
We can do a town hall, we can.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to.
I think it's education and information. I think that's the key. Education and information, because if they knew what kind of impact it's gonna make.
Well, most people do. But for some reason, when people get into their little, they're in their recliner, their own little private voting box, some people just, and rightfully so. I always say the citizens voted down the water 10 years ago. Well, maybe some folks couldn't afford it. That doesn't make them bad folks. That makes them have to make a bad choice. And that's the same thing with the police levy is, whether we like it or not, we're in a recession. Some folks may be already choosing between medicine and food, and we raise it. Let's just say we raise it 20 cents and get 30,000. It's 30,000 worth the chance of losing all of it. I don't know. That's the question. That's what we have to do is ask ourselves. But we would have to educate people. We definitely would have to say, look, we can't bring you the kind of service we're bringing you
without this increase.
Mhm.
And I imagine in that language, we have to say the levy is increasing the 180 to $2. We can't just say, we're voting for a $2.
That would be up to us to reach
Right.
every single person that votes and explain it.
We have a motion on the table.
Well, yeah, and
Then we might want to just withdraw.
I don't think you have to.
Okay.
However, I will
Yes,
say,
nothing-
this, the motion to adopt the budget, no, but also the budget, if I'm not mistaken, the budget was configured on a 180 public safety levy for this next year.
Which is
Was
what
the
you're
last
trying
year.
to say, and you don't like.
Well, but I don't even think we can change that in this next budget period. So I don't know that changing the levy will change the adoption of the budget action. And I think adopting the budget will not prevent you from saying, and by the way, go out and increase the levy in another motion.
Correct.
So currently, the motion in front of this committee is to approve the budget with those slight changes.
Correct.
And then you're going to have another motion to approve the tax rate, and then another motion to approve the permanent rate. So you got the permanent rate and then the public safety levy. But I don't believe there's one motion will not prohibit the other, except for if you don't approve the tax rates, then this budget won't be funded.
I think the only other way we could have done it is accepting the budget last. You know what I mean? Because I think usually you do the taxes first. I'm not familiar with the public safety and then the final pull the trigger. But it really, in this situation, I don't think hurts us. But
So there's a motion and a second on the table.
yeah, any other discussion on the accepting of the budget?
I think you need a voice or a roll call vote.
Yep.
Joseph, can you do the roll call vote?
Right. Tim Pogwitz,
Tim, yes.
Counselor Burns,
Yes.
Counselor Tidy,
Yes.
Commissioner Ashauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright,
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier.
Yes.
I believe that's.
And the mayor.
Oh, Mayor
the
did.
count- yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Mayor Cox. Mayor Cox, you don't usually get a vote. How would you like to vote?
Yes. Okay, now, it seems like the hard one is the police levy. I'd like to save that for last. I would like a motion to approve the permanent rate, and I believe it is 2.688 per thousand, 2.2688 per thousand.
And what was it before?
That's what it's.
It's been, so we got to continue.
Yep.
And that's a maximum.
Yep.
Without a lot of, like a whole district-wide election and all that.
So there was a motion and a second on that. Any discussion? This case, a roll call then?
Sure. We'll Go opposite the sign. Mayor Cox,
Permanent.
Perfect.
260.
Does it have some official language, David? Does it have some official language he needs to read into the record for this?
Well, yeah, we could have done the motion for the tax and the budget.
Oh, well, but I think separating them out doesn't hurt, and it seems like one of them is going to have a lot more discussion. I'd like to get.
We already, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess we're splitting that one motion into three. So, any discussion on the permanent tax rate? Okay, go ahead.
Call on you to vote.
I said.
So the motion included the permanent tax
No,
rate?
no, it was only the permanent tax rate, not
But
the.
it did include the figure, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so did we do the roll call?
Yep. I was at.
first one, yeah, and then I think we're in the second one,
Good.
and I first called Mayor Cox, who is yet to cast a vote.
Yes.
Good. Tim Baldwin.
Tim, yes.
Gary Barnes.
Yes.
Gregory Height.
Yes.
Corey Ashower.
Yes.
Barbara Wright.
Yes.
And Nancy Fraser.
Yes.
Right. All yes at 7:55.
And again, for the last one, for this budget period, staff's recommendation was to maintain, and this is what the budget was built on, the 180 per thousand in the last year of this public safety levy. We request a motion for that, but I'm also hearing that you guys make recommendations to the city council. And if you want to recommend to the city council something other than that, you're welcome to make that motion. But I think you understand what the questions are. You understand what the impact of your increases are financially. And it's just up to you to come up with something, so that's just up to you. At this point, again, the budget message was, and the budget was built on 180. So that would be at least one starting point. But it's up to you all.
You all have feelings whether or not to go above something or.
Try to come up with a number. I mean, to me, yeah, it sounds a lot, but I'm, so 180, you go back to 190, well, that's what we used to have. You go above that, how much will they allow above that? And
Start at 2.
like 2 or 205.
I'd say start at 2.
And
It's 20 cents. It's 30,000 more each year in a sense, but it's starting somewhere. But that locks us in for 4 years, right? So we operating at deficit for 5 years.
5 years.
We were 4 years ago, and I increased it to 5, and council agreed. And it gives our police department breathing room,
But we're breathing room, we're in a deficit, right?
Pardon me?
We're not paying for them, that $2. The increase of that 20 cents is still not gonna.
No, by no means. We're not even touching it. I mean, $30,000 is $30,000. What was the shortfall again, David? Do you recall in the public safety, the general fund transfer? 150, so we're taking down to 120.
Yeah, if you look at line number 11, the transfer from the general fund, that's the line that shows. Where it's like, exactly.
So that locks us in at losing another 120,000 in a sense after these 4.
170,000 compared to what we adopted last year.
But this is not a new issue. This has,
I know it's not a new
David pointed out to me the whole time I was mayor, the whole time I was councilor before I was mayor, the whole time I was councilor before that. So this has been an ongoing issue. We definitely need to work on addressing one way or another. And I think the $2 recommendation from the citizens is a good starting point. I don't know if it goes up or down from there. It's a very scary deal. I know it needs to go up, but I also want the citizens to support it.
Yeah, and you just made me realize, because if we don't do some sort of an increase right now, we're gonna be looking at 50 cents in 5 years, or it's a
Yeah,
no go.
that's what I'm saying.
And it's just like the water rate. it's
They
just
said,
like everything.
yeah, they said.
5 more years.
5 years.
5 years
Can
after.
that be changed?
It can be put in the ballot, so the ballot title describes the duration of the tax.
5 years. Yeah.
It costs us a lot of money for these special elections too, so.
What if it fails? Start back over at ground zero. What if it fails?
Special
We
election.
most likely won't have the money from the police department.
That's a pretty scary thing to
So that's a
think
message.
about.
Am I right, David? I didn't overspeak. If the levy fails, we most likely won't have the money to fund our police department, correct? No. That's not true. But you can also go for a special election. Well, but if that didn't happen, so let's say you went for 20 cents more, and it failed. And that,
You don't have to fund it all. You know, the budget committee could say, well, we want 270 worth of citations and 20 cents and that would do it. But
well, do you have another recommendation beyond the 20 cents?
2.05?
No, to take away the flashing light,
Oh,
to
yeah.
take away the slow down so we can get more tickets.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
May I remind you that we're being recorded?
So a combination
I'm
of those
serious,
two
you
things
say-
to try and increase that. We'll do a combination of those two things. What do you think?
So you're recommending a 20-cent increase,
Increase.
which is what we'll be voting on. And can we put that in the motion too, that we would, or no, we probably can't, can we? About writing more tickets, I don't know.
No, I would say.
That would be something to,
No.
you can say that the budget committee, and this is talking to the chief, recommended a 20 cent to stopgap, but they also said that the need to pick up the other end with the 270 worth of citations. This is coming from the citizens.
okay.
Oh, so remember, did you hear the part where they were discussing about the different number of citations that the different officers were writing?
Yeah.
One wrote like one wrote like 5, and another wrote like 200. What he was just saying is it's a two-pronged approach. One, you talk about the tax rate on the special levy, and two, you have a heart-to-heart with the chief and talk to him about the performance issues.
But sometimes there's just a warning issued and not an actual citation.
If you look at the police report, there's a lot
There's
of warnings.
that
There's a
are
lot
not
of warnings.
Yes.
Because once a policeman takes the time to get his car up to speed and catch a person, that's already lost the decision. So if he made that decision, anyway,
Well, but we're just managers. We're not micromanagers. All we can say is that we are bleeding to death in public safety, and you are the ones that are gonna make the change. However you're gonna do it, you're gonna write your own ticket, because we can't do anything other than this.
so it would be up to you to direct him to have the hard part.
Right.
You know, that's how it works.
And that's where I'm landing on with this.
Yeah. So I like your. So
The
if
police
you were
officer.
to increase the citations to 270,000 in the budget, that would give you another $95,000 that you could apply to engineering.
Well, when we want to.
Is that because the general fund is spending 95 on public safety? Okay.
The point of that whole comment is that the public safety is draining the general fund of helping other funds. And the general fund should be helping all, it shouldn't subsidize. But that money should go for everything.
Is there a motion to recommend a public safety tax rate?
Any recommendations?
Sure, they can make a motion. You're the budget committee, any member of a committee can make a motion.
You guys, as citizens, can make the
I'm
same.
not making the motion.
You can also-
Hey, you're behind the seat now, behind the mic.
You can also so move. He says, do all that.
That didn't really help that much. I thought that motion was.
No, it's not.
Okay, excuse me, I move that, for the public safety option tax for 5 years, we increase it to $2.
Second.
Okay, for a second.
Any discussion on that?
No?
We just have to worry about our language, how it gets written into this. We really need to make sure that the language is written correctly this time, so it doesn't, we don't have the same thing we did last time.
Well, and the way we'll do that is we'll have their minds made up before they even get to the language.
I'm just saying, the language was so screwy, it was so bad last time. It really made it look like it was $303.80 instead of.
Legal, we were forced.
I know, I'm just saying, we have to figure out how to do it this time. Sure.
But always remember, regardless of that wordage or whatever, it's always been close. Way closer than we would assume.
That's 3-0.
So we are at a discussion unless Joseph wants to call for the roll call. Do we have any more?
So votes on the motion to propose increase in police levy up to $2 out of $1,000 to the city council. Corey Ashour.
Yes.
All right. Barbara Wright.
Yes.
Nancy Frazier.
Yes.
Mayor Cox.
It's the right thing, yes, yes.
Tim Hogwitz.
Absolutely, do we look at the vote, yes, here,
I was just thinking that.
30 weeks from now.
Looks like a reasonable.
And I'm not saying I'm going to, I just, you know,
Just remember, every time we make a decision. That's fair.
Tim, yes.
Gary Burns.
Yes.
I'm sorry for talking to you.
And Greg Petty.
No. Motion carried.
Motion carries
6-1.
6-1.
Is there any other business you can think of, David? You've been through this a time or two. Is there any other business that the budget committee needs to do this evening? Is there any other business you can think of that the budget committee needs to do this evening besides those three motions?
once they let me.
Very good. Okay, so Mr. Mayor, there's nothing further from staff.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies, so much for showing up. You can see how important it is. Because, I mean, like we touched on, the whole reason for this part of the budget process is for you to be here so that the community does have it. So it's super important. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Now you can be our advocates.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. And you can see it's super difficult. Complex ways. It seems like it's so simple when you're thinking about it from the outside. When you're actually doing it, it's scary to do know how fragile that is.
And now we can just be like, well, it's the community side. Everyone from the community.
Joseph, you got the photos, did you? With 3 round circles and down on the side.